But anyway, it's time for our second interview for the day. We're speaking to amazing Faith 47. We've been trying to get her on the show, but she was like, okay, I'm going to stop all my work. I'll come to you. So we are honored to welcome one of South Africa's most influential street artists, Faith 47. From the walls of Cape Town to cities around the world, her murals and multimedia artworks explore themes of human connection, social justice, and the passage of time. Faith 47, welcome to 89.5 FM.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here, and just Bush Radio is such a wonderful institution that's been around so long, so it's an honor.
Nice. Faith, quickly, before we even dive into your recent works, the things that you've been doing, take me back. I want you to take me back to the love of art, because sometimes we forget that certain, decisions or certain careers are always sometimes molded while you are still a child. How did you even get into art?
Yes, and before I even begin, I just want to wish everyone happy Eid today. I was down at the beach early this morning, and the tide was so low, and you had seen it had been so high during the night with all the seaweed and everything, and I just thought about the moon, and there's a celebratory feeling in the streets. You can feel it, so I wanted to send that out. Greetings and love to everyone. In terms of art making, I think that as human beings, we have an innate creative ability from a very young age. We see shadows and light and the way things grow and the kind of, layers of reality. And as we get older, we lose some of that because we have to adapt to day-to-day life and pressures. So for me, I kind of prioritized a little bit some of those like early feelings. I always go back to them and try and bring them into my adult life as much as possible. So kind of weaving that thread through from, when we were kids, but we were a single mother, but she really, she was quite alternative, hippie kind of woman, healer, and she allowed us to have magic in our childhood. And I'm so grateful for that. So we were able to kind of thread that. I've been able to thread back to that whenever I'm needing to. Yeah.
Nice, man. Okay, so now obviously with your scale of art, like to think big, to do things, like your some of your beautiful work, someone can see it miles away. To how did that one came about in terms of like showcasing your art form but making it big?
Well, for those of you who have been in Cape Town for a long time, probably remember some of my earlier stuff, which, I got into the graffiti art scene culture, I guess, when I was a teenager. And also we had my son really young. His dad was a graffiti writer. And so that whole kind of thinking at that time was like, get your name up and get it big and get into like really prime spots. And that was I guess I adopted that thinking. But then I also started to really love the way that one can engage with the environment, the spaces, the people who are living there too. So it became just this love of engaging with spaces. And sometimes that does become like really satisfying when you can go really huge, because you can have a big impact. But then other times something really tiny can be equally as gratifying and even more beautiful often, maybe something that nobody sees, even in like an abandoned building. So, yeah, I think it's more of this idea of work that exists in spaces that people move through. That's like art that is alive in society, I think is kind of beautiful to me.
Okay, Kemi?
Well, I want to ask, I was driving, I don't know what artwork it was, but it was the first one I saw of you in Cape Town. Maybe you know it, you were with me. It was like an angel on a house when you go over the bridge, whatever.
I forgot.
I saw it, and it touched me. I want to know, what is the message that you want to bring with your artworks?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I don't really have much up in Cape Town these days. There was a period when I had a lot up, and then I've been living overseas and kind of traveling a lot, and a lot of my work landed up being in a lot of other places. But I've just recently come back to Cape Town, to South Africa, to live after living in the States for 7 years. Sorry, I'm drifting from your question, though.
It's all right.
There's like several thematics, and also I think my practice has moved into a studio practice quite strongly, although I still do public works, but the thematics kind of move over all the mediums. And you know, as an umbrella, maybe it's got to do with connecting to the natural world, which I think is like one of the biggest issues probably in society as a whole, is and so many of our other issues kind of stem from that dislocation to the earth and to our food and to the animal kingdoms and the plants and just the cycles of nature and that kind of appreciation that came with living close to the earth. And now we live so disconnected that we also feel disconnected from each other and from ourselves. So I think the threads, although you could probably specify them into other, like, more specific themes, they all kind of root a little bit to that. So, like, a calling to just, like, connect with ourselves more as well. Yeah.
So now, obviously, you lived in the US. You see the artwork. You see the policies surrounding artists. South Africa, are we still backwards when it comes to letting artists express themselves?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's great because actually when you're painting here, it's quite easy to find spaces, and people are really encouraging and supportive of that. I think, of course, the Cape Town city itself has introduced quite a while ago those anti-nuisance bylaw policies, which are, pretty anti-poor and definitely anti-public art. And that is really, really restrictive. And maybe one of the reasons I stopped painting here a little bit as well, because I felt restrictive within that legal system, which I've only ever seen in Barcelona, actually. It's not like a normal thing, the permit system they have here. That being said, I think most artists just keep operating as per normal because, it's kind of weird. Cape Town's funny like that. They have a lot of like really strong laws that don't really reflect the life on the streets and like actual life, And
another part is we've seen it all over the world. Artificial intelligence is slowly taking over to a point where it's scaring other people. Other people are feeling like you can still use it. What is your take as someone who's been there? I even saw like there was a guy who invented this thing to create tattoos with it. I was like, okay, where are we going now?
I don't have a strong opinion on this in terms of where society is going. Just in my own life, I am trying to get more and more, present and less on screen and less on my phone and, getting my hands in the earth and working with the day-to-day, like, reality of that. And so, I like, vinyl records as opposed to, like, just Spotify or something. So I love the creating art is not about, like, downloading something. It's about the process of it, right? So it's about the textures and how it feels and how long it takes. And to me, that's like a very analog kind of experience and something that is internal, not just external. So sure, you could make a very fast like concept piece with AI, and that's where we're going to be heading. But if you really want to like deeply experience life, then you need to actually read the book, not just
have that connection.
You've got to have that visceral reality with life. So that's just what I go back to. Yeah.
Like you just said, like you lived in the US for 7 years. You painted then places all over the world. Like, how does the location influence the way you approach your work?
Yeah, so for me, actually, like I said earlier, I prefer actually smaller works often that have like interesting environments. Actually, I always say to date, my favorite project might be the one I did in Lebanon in 2021, and that was called The Medicinal Flowers of Lebanon. And I basically, it was about a year or two after the explosion, so there were areas of the city that had been like, really destroyed, and the whole economy had just like totally crashed. And there were so many like buildings that were just like devastated from the many decades of different things that had been happening there, and even now what's going on there is so devastating. But so painting these kind of beautiful like medicinal flowers that are coming up from the rubble of buildings. What was your question again?
Yeah, how like the different locations you paint,
Yes,
how
exactly.
it influences and...
Well, and that began in South Africa, because when I was painting here, initially it was just to actually paint and like this kind of angst that you have, that I had like as a teenager here, and just like getting that out and being part of like a movement and all of that kind of thing. But then when you actually are out there, that experience of being in different communities and different neighborhoods that you might not normally be in, or you kind of have this like really direct experience of a space and an environment, and that changes who you are,
Again, if you have just tuned in now, you're tuning in on 89.5 FM. We have Faith 47, human rights activist, artist, creative. Man, she's been doing a whole lot of things. So much of your work, Faith, deals with themes of human rights, displacement, spirituality. How do you see the role of art in activism and social change?
Right. So, how to answer that one? Like when I began with my artwork was definitely a lot more, I guess there were more obvious kind of like human rights type of messaging, especially like the Freedom Charter project that I did. That was in about 2010, I think. And but I think as I've kind of evolved and matured, like that, those things are a lot more subtle. They still form a basis to my thinking and my ethos, but it's not like I'm putting them out there on loudspeaker. Actually, it's a lot more subtle, because I've found that actually it's those internal changes that create the external ones, and if people don't shift internally, then the external changes, it's kind of like that ripple effect. So, that, and then also just like it's my own process too, and very personal. So. Can I say it's a lot more nuanced than just direct speak sometimes? So I think there is a massive role in art in social movements, and it's always been a huge part of it. But I've never felt that it is any artist's responsibility to have to carry that. And I think sometimes there is that pressure put on artists, like, you have to speak out about that. You got to post this and XYZ. But like, I do believe in freedom of expression, and so that people can just go in any direction they want. And we should just be supportive of the fact that people are blossoming in their way, and that in itself is an act of life. And I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
It does, yeah. And also, like you said, your work is not only like the big murals. It also includes installations, digital art, and paintings. Or like, what led you to explore all these different mediums?
Well, I never actually studied art, so I'm self-taught. We kind of hit the ground running, having my child early, and so my art making never really had too many boundaries, can I say? I never thought, I do this type of art. And I think a lot of people probably do know my muralism and kind of public-facing work, because that was just a lot more out there. But I've always felt like I can just, if I'm interested in a medium, I can go and explore it. And I go and explore it in a way that I'm learning as I make it, and often from a mentor or somebody who is in that field, or collaborating too. And I think that every different medium allows you to speak differently, and you kind of find ways to express different things that has a different depth to it according to the medium and what that allows you. So sometimes when you have something you want to express, then a medium calls for that, and that's kind of what's drawn me to explore, for instance, sculpture or a new media piece with video, right? Like, it's very different to what you can do with a two-dimensional painting. And, you know, even the two-dimensional kind of street paintings have their limitations. You often are thinking about an audience and you're sensitive to a community. And so that is also censors you slightly, you know, in terms of what you put out there. You self-censor, even if you don't mean to.
So now let's come back to your name. Fate 47 carries obviously a certain mystery for me, the number 47. Can you share the story behind it?
Well, it is really something that is, everybody asks me this question. It's something that developed, like I say, when I was a teenager, and it just kind of stuck. But it was a word that I thought would be nice to see in like dilapidated spaces, you know, this idea of like having a bit of light in, and the number came from my grandmother. She said it popped up a lot in her life.
Shout out to Granny.
Hey. Always.
Well, I got a last question for me. I also, like, I want to plug my show on Saturday. It's Art Speakers, where I talk with artists about art, and I go into accessibility of the art, because I noticed that it's not always easy for people to get through art. How is your vision about it? Obviously, like, murals make it accessible, but maybe explain more about it.
Are you talking about, just explain a little more?
Yeah, so in the art scene, it's not always easy to get through art, to get it to all different kind of audiences, to make it accessible. Do you have like an opinion about it or not?
Well, I mean, I think, like, kind of how I said earlier, how the different mediums have different ways of expressing. In the same way, they also have different audiences, and that just comes down to, I don't really discriminate from one to the other, and I think all audiences are valid, all people are valid, right? So I enjoy the White Cube gallery space for what it is, as well as, like, all of these spaces, I think, have their and social media is good for that too. I mean, as much as also there's pitfalls of it, like, it's also just one other way of reaching people. I don't know if I have an answer.
No, I get it. And
sorry.
Can I add, like, how was it for you to work your way up in the arts?
Yeah, my attitude from the beginning has always just been DIY. Like, absolutely. And I think that's helped me a lot, that I just always thought that, like, nobody's going to do this for me. Nobody's coming to me to make this happen. I just have to go and do that. And, like, I said to myself, like, if I'm not going to take a 9-to-5 job, I need to put those amount of hours and more into, like, my own work, and then also put it out there and reach out to people and, like, not wait around for it to happen. And so that was always my attitude, and still is to this day, So I think that can go a long way, especially in a country like South Africa, where we have zero, like, very, very little funding for people. It's quite hard compared to, like, Europe and that. So it's a hard career, actually, in that way. So you have to really be creative in the way you work and not just the work itself. For sure.
So now, as an artist who has seen the evolution of street art, how do you feel about its growing commercialization and inclusion, obviously, in the mainstream art world?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I try not to look at these movements as umbrellas. Personally, I like to look at, like, individual people's careers, and it's been lovely to know certain people, like, over, like, 2 decades now, and see kind of their evolution and progression. And so I don't see it, I think we're even beyond that now in terms of the crossover of street artists into the fine art world and fine artists who work in public arena spaces. I think the categories are limiting and kind of binary. you know.
So any upcoming events, 2025? What's your plan this year?
Yes. Actually, in 2 weeks, myself and my son, Kia Tama, who is an amazing artist, and his father, who's also a wonderful artist and tattoo artist, we are having a kind of family retrospective show in Amsterdam.
Nice.
That's a very sweet exhibition, kind of about Kia's upbringing within like a creative community of Cape Town, and all his drawings from when he was really young. And so it's kind of about him and his life and his art evolution. And then in June, I have a show in San Francisco, which is all tapestries. Those are all tapestries which are deconstructed, like discontinued currencies from different countries, as well as like atlases and maps. So it's kind of a geopolitical, but also this idea of like recreating beautiful objects out of redundant.
Seems like you're traveling a lot. Yeah?
Mediums.
So are you going all to all these exhibitions, or are you just gonna?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, I have been traveling a lot. When I started traveling, probably like 2006, I started getting invitations from the kind of muralism work I was doing. There was just a big wave of projects, like globally. And so I got caught up in that, where I was just on the road a lot. And it was fantastic, you know. And then I also was taking my son with me a lot to these projects, and, you know, everything from Madagascar to Switzerland. So like a very diverse, like, location.
That means you're nicely exposed, though,
really
to the
wonderful,
world art.
Very exposed to the world. And then I moved to the States, you know, kind of just thinking like, oh, the world is so huge and everywhere is home. But then eventually you realize that home is actually home.
Nice, man. Faith, before we let you go, quickly, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do it? And also any words for the inspiring upcoming artist?
Well, I mean, I guess the easiest way is just on social media, Instagram, Faith47. Inspiring words for the artist. Well, you know, it's just like keep connected to that, and maybe it sounds cliche, but that like inner light, you know, I think we all have it. And that's not even advice for an artist, it's just for life, huh?
Nice. We're taking it also.
Yeah,
I'm taking it. I don't know about you.
It's the only thing that gets you through.
Any last words before we go straight to the news headline?
Just a big thank you.
No, thanks to you, Faith.